The hum of the orbital station was routine, a steady beat above the vibrant chaos of Vanner Prime below. Lights flickered across vast sensor walls, displaying a metropolis teeming with energy until the first pulse. A wave of static hissed through. Every open channel, one by one, data feeds vanished. The station's AI tried to recalibrate, but the silence wasn't technical. It was systemic. Clouds over Vanner's atmosphere began to swirl unnaturally, darkening into spirals of ash. The oceans boiled. The continent spanning archaeology's testaments to 1,000 years of civilization fractured, then melted under an unseen pressure. Within minutes, the green-blue jewel of the Dominion turned to black glass. The crew didn't speak. They only watched, frozen. Then the last functioning sensor caught a shadow moving faster than Tachyon prediction models could compute. It vanished beyond the system's edge, silent as the grave it left behind. The scout drone drifted through the ghost of Vanner Prime, its hull pitted with the residual heat of orbital collapse. Below, once mighty cities lay reduced to obsidian plains. Oceans hissed into clouds of acid steam, and the sky, once violet with twin moons, churned in a storm of scorched ions. Among the debris, a jagged remnant of a Vanner dreadnought spun slowly, its hull carbon-scored and sundered. Etched into the fractured plating, too deliberate to be coincidence, were residual ion trails, human in signature. Known, classified, and unmistakable. The drone transmitted the footage. Silence answered. The priority transmission cut through. Layers of bureaucratic chatter like a blade. Arlen Voss stood motionless in the negotiation chamber. The words recall immediate Earth glowing red on his retinal HUD. Around him, peace talks between rival border colonies froze mid-sentence. His pulse didn't rise, but his jaw tightened. Vanir. That name hadn't echoed through official channels in years. Not since the war. Not since the fires. He sat alone in the transport cabin, a whisper of static in his earpiece as classified archives. Unlocked. Operation Indigo Spear. Silent Phoenix. Words no one had spoken aloud since the armistice. He scrolled through them in the darkness, each line of text a ghost. He remembered writing some of those orders. Signing them. Suggesting them. The Vanner, proud and dangerous, once stood poised to challenge the Accord. Back then, preemption had seemed necessary. Now, with an entire empire gone, the ghosts returned, whispers of guilt with edges like razors. Summit Chamber rang with the voices of 20 civilizations, but none carried calm. Holograms flared. Accusations cut through the tension like blades. They were arrogant, yes, but this is extermination. The Vanner had ruled for millennia. Cruel yet majestic. Now, all that remained was a scorched silence and the blackened crust of 1,000 cities. The fragment drifted above the council table, a sliver of Vanner alloy, scarred by ion burns unmistakably Terran. Earth's ambassador spoke of sabotage. False flags, enemies unknown. But few listened. The Accord always brittle trembled. Alliances frayed. And somewhere behind the curtain, war sharpened its teeth. She stood before the fleet holomap, arms folded, gaze like tungsten. Admiral Juno Sarek's voice echoed calm through the static, dismissing speculation with the polish of a veteran. Layer, we did not strike the Vanner. We are not monsters. Privately behind sealed doors, her tone shifted low, calculated. You're chasing ghosts. Arlen, the council needs diplomacy, not ghosts. No admission, no denial. Just a warning. Cloaked in command. Her eyes never blinked, even when Arlen invoked the fragment. She already knew. That much was clear, but what else did she know? And what had she already done? She appeared in the encrypted relay feed like a ghost dredged from classified archives. Mira Kale, sharp-eyed, armor-scarred, voice low with warning. You were right. It's not over. No preamble. No smile. Just gravity in every word. Her image flickered with orbital distortion, but Arlen saw it, the weight behind her stare. Not fear, guilt. Memory surged. Whispers of unsanctioned missions, of bodies buried under sealed orders. Of a daughter who once followed Kale into the dark. Now Kale had returned, carrying ghosts. And Arlen understood too late. That silence often screamed the loudest warnings. Dr. Ville Run stood beneath the flickering archive halls, images of Vanir art and song dancing like echoes from a dead civilization. Her voice trembled not from fear, but grief sharpened by knowledge. They were arrogant, yes, but they dreamed, Arlen. They created. She pressed a trembling finger to the projection of a shattered temple. Its spires melted into slag. If it was us, if humans did this. Her breath hitched. Then we are no better than what they feared we'd become. In her eyes he saw more than sorrow. He saw judgment. And the truth he dared not speak. The technician's fingers hovered, uncertain, over the playback controls. In the dim glow of the orbital station, silence pressed like a hand on the throat. The final sensor ping flickered on screen, an impossibility caught between frames. A shadow moved. Faster than light. Faster than thought. Not human. Not Vanir. GUST motion, and then absence. The tech zoomed in. The distortion howled back an echo, fractured and raw, a scream. Metallic, ragged, pulled through layers of reality. It wasn't a voice. It was a warning, then nothing. No energy trace. No trail, only the void. Listening back. The war archives hummed around him. Each holographic thread, a ghost of violence neatly filed. Commander Arlen Vos stood in the dim chamber, eyes narrowed, as line after line of fleet telemetry passed across the display. Dreadnoughts, corvettes, orbital bombardment platforms, each logged with precise timecodes and locations. Each entry painted a picture of immaculate order. Too immaculate. Nothing in war was this clean. He zoomed in on the deployment logs surrounding the Vanir sector. Patrols scheduled, refueling documented. No human ships within 10 light years of Vanir space on the date in question. 0 anomalies. 0 redactions. A statistical impossibility pretending to be a fact. His gut clenched. This wasn't precision. It was a whitewash. Arlen ran a comparative analysis. Old records, his own fleet movements from the last war. Back then, chaos left fingerprints. Missed updates. Delayed pings. But this was engineered perfection. A story written after the ink had dried. He didn't need proof. Not yet. He needed a name. Someone high enough to access and scrub strategic logs without oversight. Only one name came to mind. Admiral Juno Sarek. His fingers curled into a fist. She was hiding something. And Arlen Vos was going to rip the veil off, one lie at a time. Admiral Juno Sarek stood like a sculpture of war-composed, precise, and cold. Her office aboard High Command's orbital tier was all steel and shadow, the void beyond the viewport swallowing starlight. Arlen stepped into her presence with restraint coiled tight behind his eyes. He didn't speak. Not at first. She did. Digging into ghosts will bury you with them, she said, without turning. Her tone was glacier flat, free of menace yet heavy with weight. Arlen asked about discrepancies, about fleet logs, about the Vanir and the black scars left on glassed worlds. She offered denials without blinking. No sanctioned mission entered. Vanir space, that is fact, but facts had texture. Her words were too smooth. Behind her calm, he saw the calculation. Not fear. Anticipation. A woman already navigating fallout, years before the detonation. Sarek wasn't surprised. She was prepared. And that terrified him more than any lie. The shuttle held in Neptune's shadow, cloaked and silent. In the dim glow of auxiliary lights, Mira Kale emerged from the gloom like a memory returning from exile. Her voice carried no warmth, only weight. Operation Ghostfire, she said. It was real, and it was mine. Arlen didn't speak. His eyes did questions, accusations, dread. She explained without apology. A task force built in shadows, answerable only to a black chain of command. Their mission: eliminate existential threats before they ever reach the Accord. No oversight. No appeal. I shut it down, Mira said. Or thought I did. But someone else picked up the pieces. Her words fell like stones. A program that erased entire civilizations, now out of anyone's hands. I don't know who's running it now, she said. But I know how they think. The dread wasn't in what she knew. It was in what she no longer controlled. Mira slid the black datapad across the table. No markings, no encryption locks. Just a blinking prompt. Arlen tapped it, and the silence in the shuttle grew thick. Video logs flickered to life. Not footage, confessions. Ghostfire operatives, faceless behind tactical visors, reciting mission objectives. One after another. Planetary sterilization. Sublight bombardment protocols, viral warhead deployments. Each target. Alien, civilian. Arlen's fingers tightened around the pad. It was all real. Not whispers. Not speculation. Then the screen changed. Unit rosters. Deployment dates. Personnel assignments. A name stopped his breath. Rhea Voss. She had been part of it. Not a rumor. Not a ghost. A soldier in a unit that sterilized worlds in the name of security. He closed his eyes. Mira's voice broke the silence. She refused an order, walked into exile. The weight in Arlen's chest became iron. Betrayal. Grief. Guilt. Sharpened by revelation. His daughter had fought the monster, and the monster wore their flag. It was the only time he'd ever seen Rhea hesitate in uniform. The colony below shimmered under twin moons. Silent in the scope feed, no military heat signatures, no active defense grid. Just domes, greenhouses, and the dull pulse of life support. Families. Children. Not soldiers. Arlen's voice crackled over the channel, distant but commanding. "You have your orders, Lieutenant." But her hand hovered above the trigger. She didn't reply. Didn't need to. Silence was insubordination. "Rhea, this colony is a confirmed threat. You fire that payload, or..." Her voice cut through like broken glass. "It's a lie. They're not soldiers. I won't murder them." Then she was gone, her ship breaking formation. The payload never launched. Hours later, in his office, Arlen's words were iron and fire. He called her a disgrace, a traitor, a coward hiding behind sentiment. She said nothing in reply. She just looked at him, eyes wide with hurt, jaw clenched to keep the tears inside. Then she turned and walked out. He never saw her again. Now, years later, alone in the cold dark, that moment returned to him like a blade between the ribs. She was right, and he had buried her for it. The stealth corvette glided through null space like a ghost through fog. Mira piloted in silence, her fingers dancing across controls, too old to be standard issue. Arlen sat beside her, the past still thundering in his chest. Coordinates decrypted from the Ghostfire. Logs led to a forgotten edge of the Perseid Veil. No star charts marked it now. The derelict station hung in orbit above a dead moon, half devoured by time and solar corrosion. As they approached, the ship bucked. Instruments stuttered. Proximity sensors blinked and died. Something was scrambling their tech, not natural, not random. Arlen looked up. There were no stars on that side of the viewport. Just darkness, heavy and still. Watching, the station loomed closer. Skeletal arms reaching like it had died screaming. Whatever Ghostfire built here, it was never meant to be found again. Inside the station's gutted core, Mira cracked open the black vault, a spherical archive encoded in quantum filaments. Its security systems were dust and silence. The holograms lit the dark. Arlen watched cities buckle into nothing. Oceans ripped upward as gravity inverted. Entire crusts atomized. A planet became a pearl of compressed mass, a singularity with no event trail, no radiation, no sound. A silent weapon. A perfect erasure. And stamped at the end of each file. Project Terminus, approved. Arlen felt it hollow him out. The fear was not of what had been done, but how carefully, how elegantly, how deliberately it had been designed. Weapons built not to win wars, but to erase histories, he whispered. It before he realized, we became the monsters we feared. Mira didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. Buried deep within the Vanner lexicon, wrapped in layered dialects and esoteric scripts, the truth unraveled like an ancient wound. Dr. Vele Run's voice shook as she pieced it together in the dark of her lab, her tendrils twitching with dread. The Vanner had not ruled the galaxy out of arrogance. They had acted as wardens eons ago, before language had a name for horror. A force known only as the Voidwalkers had crossed into reality. Predatory beyond comprehension, they devoured stars, folded minds, shattered dimensions. The Vanner had found a way to trap them within a prison they called the Black Prism, an artifact sealed at the heart of their empire. Their fleets, their brutal laws, their constant vigilance were not acts of tyranny. They were containment, and now silence over Vanner Prime made sense. They hadn't been destroyed. They had been consumed. The Black Prism was broken. The Voidwalkers had awakened. Dr. Ring slumped back from the translator module, her breath catching. Not fear, not grief. Something deeper. Doom. Because if the Vanner had failed, then no species was safe. And the humans, with their gravitic warheads and blind pride, had just broken the last lock holding the dark at bay. A signal crackled through Myra's quantum relay, corrupted, fraying at the edges of physics. She stabilized it with analog controls, bypassing protocols designed to shield minds from madness. That the voice was Vanir, female, shaking, broken. The Voidwalkers have awakened. We screamed. No one heard. The prism lies shattered. They come through light, through thought. We static devoured the rest, but before the silence returned, one last pulse coordinates burned into the transmission code. A shattered moon in a forsaken system. A place outside time. Mira didn't speak as the data downloaded. She only turned, eyes grim. Arlen felt it like a chill in marrow. This wasn't politics. Wasn't war. This wasn't even vengeance. This was extinction. Rehearsed, and they were already late to stop it. The stars stretched cold and infinite beyond the Corvette's glass. Arlen stood alone at the viewport, hands clenched behind his back, posture rigid but hollow. He whispered her name, Rhea. He had buried his daughter beneath duty, buried his doubts beneath protocol. He had defended Earth's every action, masked behind medals and polished lies. But out here, the silence stripped him bare. He saw it now. The Dreadnought's remains, the erased worlds, the lies stacked like bones beneath his uniform. The Vanner weren't a threat, they were a warning. And humanity, blind and arrogant, had broken the seal. Not all threats came with guns. Some came with hunger too vast to name. Arlen's image of humanity, resilient, righteous, unbeatable, began to fracture. In its place bloomed something smaller, quieter. Hope, perhaps. Or penance. He turned to the navigation console, inputting the coordinates Mira retrieved. This wasn't a mission. It was a reckoning. And for the first time in years, he didn't think of saving Earth's legacy. He thought of saving its soul. The neutron star pulsed in rhythmic fury outside the armored viewport, a cosmic heart beating once every 1.3 seconds. Its gravity bent space, twisted sensors, fried weaker minds. Perfect camouflage. Arlen slid through the corridor shadows like a phantom, Mira beside him, silent, lethal. Stolen fleet clearance codes danced through security firewalls, carving a path to the vaults buried deep within the installation's core. Inside, the databanks hissed to life, revealing classified files sealed under the directive. Project Sunpiercer. Arlen's breath caught. He read, 3 Vanir frontier systems, targeted, hit, sterilized. Sarek's orders were explicit. Surgical strikes. Political destabilization. Collapse without trace. But it ended there. No mention of Vanir Prime, no directive beyond containment. The glassing, the annihilation of an entire civilization, was not part of any authorized plan. Arlen scrolled further. Blank files, missing timeframes. Redacted datasets clawed out with surgical precision. It wasn't just omission. It was curation. Something had used the chaos of Sunpiercer as smoke. Something ancient, patient, and terribly efficient. Behind him, Mira muttered, "We gave it an opening." Arlen stood frozen, surrounded by dead truth and dying light. They hadn't started the end, but they'd unlocked the door it came through. Back aboard the Corvette, the truth settled like ash in Arlen's lungs. Sarek had acted decisively, ruthlessly, but not blindly. The strike against the Vanir was limited, tactical, political, not annihilative. That part hadn't been her. So who or what had turned the Vanir's core worlds to slag? And more disturbing, why had Sarek kept the rest hidden? In the hollow quiet, Arlen saw her strategy for what it was: misdirection. Not guilt, not innocence. Control. She had seen the edges of the storm, maybe even glimpsed the thing behind it. And instead of warning the Accord, she'd chosen silence. Control the narrative. Quarantine the truth. Let the galaxy believe humanity capable of such wrath, if only to keep them afraid. But in doing so, she'd fed the fire. Allowed it to grow unseen. Until now, Arlen's fists clenched at his sides. They weren't just hunting ghosts anymore. They were running from what came after. The data vault's lights died first. Then the shadows moved. Silent, disciplined fleet. Operatives in obsidian armor, Sarek's unseen hand. The air turned metallic with tension as Arlen shoved the encrypted drive into his satchel. No time. Mira hissed, dragging him into a utility shaft barely wide enough for breath. Then came fire. Plasma bolts shredded steel. Explosive decompression roared behind them, sucking heat and oxygen into space's hungering maw. The service tunnel groaned, buckled. Mira fired blind behind them, her shots measured, controlled even as her legs seared crimson from a grazing. Hit. Arlen pulled her along, teeth clenched against the pain in his soul more than his body. This wasn't just an ambush. It was a purge. The tunnel collapsed behind them as the access bulkhead sealed. Air returned with a thunderclap, alive for now, but Arlen knew. They had been marked. No more shadows. Sarek had declared open war. The Corvette's med bay hummed low and sterile as Mira stitched her own leg. Jaw tight, eyes sharper than the scalpel she used. Arlen stood silent, the encrypted file still clutched like a wound. Then her voice sliced through the quiet. "You gave her the seed. She planted it." Arlen turned, the accusation cutting deeper than any blade. Myra didn't flinch, didn't soften. She bled and stared, demanding the truth he had buried years ago. In the haze of policy meetings and defense forecasts, Arlen had written a white paper, strategic projections, cautionary doctrines. The Vanir, he had argued, were not just arrogant, they were expansionist. Dangerous. He hadn't met extermination. He hadn't imagined firestorms and singularities, and cities turned to glass. But Sarek had read between the lines. She'd taken his words as a weapon, given them form. Project Sunpiercer was her sword, but it was forged in his logic. "I was trying to protect Earth," he muttered. Mira's voice broke, brittle with fury. "And you damned the species to save your pride." Arlen sat, breath shallow. Guilt, no. Longer gnawed at him, it devoured. Not all sins are chosen. Some are simply signed and forgotten, but the blood they spill remembers everything. The signal was corrupted, stitched together from broken code, and time life needed no introduction. Rhea Voss. She looked older, worn by silence and horror. The shimmer of her old uniform hung in tatters, eyes reflecting a starlight that didn't belong to any sun Arlen knew. "We found them." Her voice cracked. In the dark between stars, they whispered and screamed. Her gaze wavered, not in fear but in resignation. They weren't dead, just waiting, cold and hungry. "We tried to warn you." A pause, then softer. "Tell." "My father, I didn't run. I chose to stand." The feed ended in static, her final breath swallowed by a scream of tearing metal and a flash of void light. No location. No survivors. Just a daughter's last defiance carved into the silence of a broken galaxy. The dead had begun to speak, and the living could no longer pretend. The recording played. Again, and again, and again. Arlen sat motionless in the darkened chamber of the Corvette, the flicker of his daughter's face reflected in his glassy eyes. Each time her voice cracked, each time her lips trembled. The silence between breaths crushed him harder than any accusation. This wasn't the voice of a soldier ready for death, it was the voice of a daughter abandoned to it. Her final moments weren't noble. They were desperate. Her ship had been ripped apart by things he couldn't name, creatures made of lightning and nightmare. The shadows had torn through hull and hope alike, and still she had stood her ground, not out of duty, out of resolve. Her own, not his. He dropped the datapad. It clattered against the deck and slid away. His breath caught, shallow and sharp. His hands trembled. Then he broke. Tears he hadn't shed in decades, spilled without dignity. No uniform, no title, no fleet. Just a father mourning too late. For all his warnings, all his plans, all his pride, he had failed the one person who had listened. In that moment, the war wasn't with the Vanir. It was with himself. And he was losing. Runs. Hands trembled as she pieced together the last fragment of Vanir code, the language twisted with purpose so ancient it felt alive. The black prism pulsed in the center of the Corvette's chamber, silent, inert, yet humming with secrets. "It's not a prison," she whispered. "It's a flare. A beacon, not to trap the Voidwalkers, but to draw them. The Vanir had used it as bait centuries ago, to lure the ancient predators out from the folds of space, into a carefully laid extermination field. It had worked barely. The prism remained lit to warn them away, to keep the beasts circling far from inhabited systems. But with the Vanir glassed, the loop unbroken, the signal still called. And worse, something had answered that wasn't Voidwalker, a distortion beyond even their terror. Not one scream this time, but many folded into a frequency the prism had never recorded before. The trap had failed. The lure was still active. And now, the dark had company. He didn't scream, he didn't curse. He simply stared into the vastness. Beyond the viewport, where stars died in silence and monsters waited without breath or need, the silence no longer felt cold. It felt honest. Arlen inhaled slowly, as if the void itself had lungs. He turned, voice quiet, not to Mira or Run but to the stars. No more whispers, no more hiding. He reached toward the Comes array, fingers steady now. Not from courage, but clarity. "If no one's left to hold the line, then I will." He activated every long-range channel the Corvette could reach. Civilian bands, blacknet frequencies, exiled Vanir enclaves, rogue captains, fringe colonists, a single pulse of truth. Raw, UNRED, ACT, ED. Project, Sunpiercer. The Vanir trap. The Voidwalker's return. And his voice, threading through it all, calm, steady, broken and resolved. This was no longer war. This was warning. This was purpose. The first reply came in fragments encrypted, pulsing with static and old wounds. A Vanir dreadnought, cracked but alive, drifting near the galactic rim. Its commander spoke not of vengeance but duty. Next, a rebel Accord captain, long thought dead, transmitting from the derelict edge of Omega's graveyard. She remembered Arlen's orders that once spared innocence despite the cost. Then came the Pirate Queen. Scarred, unrepentant, she remembered the peace he offered when he could have fired. Together, they formed no armada. They were shadows stitched with fire and failure. But in those signals, Arlen heard something new. Not surrender. Defiance. He named them the quiet line, unbound by governments, united by choice. And as their ships blinked into his network, one by one, a fleet was born. Not sanctioned, not pure. But willing. The line would not break again, not quietly. Not ever. Subspace rippled near the edge of a forgotten gas giant. An old mining outpost reduced to scrap and memory. The sensors screamed first. Then, silence. Not absence, but compression, as if reality itself held its breath. The stars flickered, one by one. A fold, a twist, and then ... them. The Voidwalkers didn't arrive with ships. They were arrival. Geometry collapsed in their wake, coiled. Shapes impossible to trace, moving between dimensions like thought between neurons. The gas giant's moon, once host to a listening post, flattened into a single plate of black glass in a heartbeat. No blast, no heat, just a pulse rippling outward, erasing everything in its path. The prism in Run's lap pulsed in reply, low, urgent, terrified. Arlen watched through the feed, his voice a whisper hollowed by awe. This is the beginning. Beside him, Mira stood silent, blood dried on her collar, eyes burning. Then we make sure it's not the end. The broadcast override blinked into life across thousands of systems, cutting through entertainment, military channels, even encrypted diplomatic threads. Every screen showed the same face, Commander Arlen Voss. His voice came steady, low, measured, not angry, not desperate, but surgical. He unveiled the gravitic warhead tests first. Planets crushed to pebbles, moons spun into singularities. Human technology, human authorization, human silence. Then came Project Sunpiercer operation logs, strike orders, deployment schedules, the names of the 3 Venner frontier worlds, all erased. Finally, the darkest revelation, blurred, flickering footage of Voidwalkers erupting from the fold space scars. Silent, irrefutable. No more lies, Arlen said. No more whispers behind flags. You deserve the truth, even if it damns us. He named Admiral Sarek as the orchestrator. Accused her of burying the war, the screams, the responsibility. In real time, security feeds captured her arrest, stoic, unblinking. But she smiled. You cut the hand off the trigger, she said. Now there's nothing left to pull it. She meant deterrence. She meant the weapon Earth could have used, now gone. The accord fractured instantly. Fleets stuttered. Civilian riots sparked. Alien diplomats turned away from Earth's emissaries. But Sarek's warning lingered in every mind. The truth had finally come, and with it, terror. The revelation should have stopped it all. Instead, it ignited the fuse. The Accord fleets, once hesitant, now turned toward Earth, fury overtaking caution. Arlen's broadcast proved humanity's sins, but not innocence. Rage flowed faster than facts. On council floors, peace collapsed under shouting voices and shattered alliances. And then, every star within the galactic core began to dim. Sensors blinked out. Lights died in sequence, not from natural decay, but interference. Something vast was moving, silent, deliberate. A low-frequency distortion bled into all channels, no message, no language. Just static. And stillness. Accord admirals paused. Captains froze. The gathered fleets, engines hot and guns primed, turned not toward Earth, but inward, toward the core, toward the dark. On Arlen's screen, systems went offline one by one. He whispered to himself, "It's not war anymore. It's arrival." The galaxy held its breath, and the darkness stepped through. It began as a shimmer, space itself creasing, folding, splitting like glass under pressure. From the fracture, they emerged. Not ships. Not life as anyone knew it. Void walkers. Their forms defied observation. Tessellated obelisks that bent perception. Impossible angles wrapped in shadows that devoured not only light but understanding. Black plasma bled across stars, and where it touched, instruments failed, language collapsed. Memory blurred. An Accord battlecruiser opened fire. It never finished. Reality fractured. The vessel broke not in pieces, but in dimensions, its outlines smeared across multiple timelines before vanishing like it had never existed. No explosion, no scream. Just gone. Time dilated. Seconds became minutes. Minutes collapsed into static. Gravity curled inward. Half the fleet blinked out of phase, erased from every sensor, every log, every grieving soul. On board the Corvette, Dr. Runn watched her instruments melt into nonsense. Her voice trembled. They're not ships. They're predatory thoughts. Made real. Arlen couldn't look away. These were not enemies that could be destroyed. They were absence given purpose. They were what waited at the end of intelligence and arrogance. They were the silence between stars, angry to have been disturbed. And they were here. Darcel Station flickered like a candle on the edge of known space. An ancient Vanir relic, half abandoned, now alive with defiance. They came not in legions, but fragments. A wounded Vanir dreadnought, scarred by impossible weapons. A rogue Accord destroyer, its crew of mutineers bearing human and alien blood. Pirate vessels stitched together from centuries of scavenged wars. And scattered civilian ships, unarmed but not unwilled. Arlen stood before them, no uniform now. No flag behind him. Just conviction. We are not here to win, he said. We are here to witness. To resist. To carry something forward, even if it's only the story. Mira, arm in sling, nodded beside him. Runn stood behind her gaze. Unwavering. These weren't warriors. They were its truest form, scarred, divided, desperate. But still standing, and as the darkness approached, they answered not with surrender, but with signal beacons lighting the void. With weapons humming, with voices lifted. With purpose. Even if it ended here, it wouldn't end quietly. Above the cobalt clouds of Chiros, a horror bloomed. The Voidwalker Gate wasn't built, it emerged. A great obsidian lattice of shifting glyphs and spiraling gravitational shears. It pulsed with something beyond energy, something hungry. Already, atmospheric tremors rocked the planet below. 9 billion lives waited in ignorance, seconds from annihilation. Mira Kale watched from the cockpit of her stealth corvette. Her elite crew, veterans of 100 secret wars, sat silent behind her. No orders now. Just resolve. They streaked toward the gate like ghosts, invisible against the backdrop of madness. Each ship carried destabilized fusion cores, stolen from a forgotten weapons vault. Detonation would unravel the quantum threading of the gate structure, but only if triggered from within. No AI guidance. No remote kill switches, just them. Inside the gate, gravity flexed like muscle. Mira's body strained against forces. Not meant for flesh. Alarms screamed, skin split. Still, she pressed forward. Her last transmission was calm. Tell Arlen. This was the fight I chose. The cores ignited. Light swallowed shadow, and for a heartbeat, the gate collapsed inward with a scream only the void could hear. 1 billion souls on Chiros looked up at the sky and lived, deep within. Darcel Station's vault. The black prism hummed. Runn's fingers hovered above its control lattice, carved with Vanir glyphs that defied translation. A machine older than humanity, tuned not to war, but to memory, to resonance, to fear. She'd studied it endlessly. And now she understood. The prism was never meant to destroy. It was meant to be heard. With trembling hands, she aligned the final harmonic relay. A low-frequency ripple burst outward, silent to flesh, but searing to the minds beyond space. Across the battlefield, Voidwalker geometries staggered, They twisted, folded. Some reeled back. Hope flickered. But only flickered. The prism began to overheat. Glyphs shattered. Spatial feedback warnings screamed across the interface. Run whispered to herself, the weight of cosmic history breaking her breath. We're not using a weapon. We're lighting a signal flare. The data streams twisted in real time, broadcasting across unknown spectrums into something darker. The pulse would burn out soon, or rupture space, or summon worse. But for now, for this moment, the impossible had blinked. The void had heard them. Arlen stood before the corvette's hull. Her corvette, Rhea's. The ship once lost to the void now pulsed with renewed purpose, its belly hollowed to fit a gravitic warhead designed to collapse stars. It hummed with fatal promise. Modified by exiled engineers, powered by despair and vengeance, the vessel no longer carried a crew, only a reckoning. He stared at the captain's seat, weathered by hands smaller than his. Hands he once held. Hands he once let go. Mira was gone. Her last act scorched into the event logs, etched into his memory. And Rhea. She had died alone in the dark, standing against something she could barely understand. Arlen had nothing left but this. This ship, this payload. This single, clear purpose that the Voidwalker construct had emerged over the ruins of the Vega Ark, a structure of sheer unreality, cloaked in inverted light and ceaseless whispers. If it completed its formation, every subspace channel would collapse into singularity. Every planet aligned to the old beacons would be found, harvested. No strike force could reach it in time, but he could. Arlen boarded the corvette, sat in the chair still adjusted to her height. The controls hummed. The warhead was armed. Outside, Darsal Station sent desperate calls. Run pleaded. Rogue captains offered escort. He said nothing. Instead, he opened Rhea's last log. Her voice filled the cabin. They're not just things. They're lies pretending to be truth. He touched the console. Set coordinates. The engines lit. As he launched, he whispered not to the crew, not to the command net, but to the empty seat beside him. This is the burden I gave you. Let me carry it now. And the last ship of Arlen Voss vanished into the dark, warhead pulsing with the heartbeat of defiance. The Voidwalker construct unfolded like a black lotus, its petals a fractal tapestry of hunger. It breathed subspace. It thought in singularities. The Accord fleet shattered against it like waves on a cliff, each strike deflected by impossible angles and recursive shields of dark thought. Into this chaos, Arlen plunged. The corvette, small and sharp, danced between ruptured moons and burning wreckage. It was invisible, untouchable, because it had become one with its pilot's will, not to survive, but to end. Inside the construct, the laws of reality unwound. Geometry bled into metaphor, hulls floated sideways in time. He passed a corridor that whispered in Rhea's voice, saw his reflection blink back decades younger. He flew deeper. The heart of the construct revealed itself, not as a chamber, but as a memory. His memory. A moment he'd buried, the day he told Rhea to follow orders, no matter what. Her face tears in steel. Then I'll disobey you too. The warhead pulsed. Ready. He smiled. Finally he understood. He opened all channels, broadcast. This. Rhea's voice flowed across every comlink, every screen, every surviving mind. We found them, in the dark between stars. They whispered and screamed. Then Arlen spoke. No more ghosts. No more monsters. And he hit the trigger. The warhead ignited. A singularity bloomed within the Voidwalker construct, not a violent explosion, but a perfect silence that crushed stars into memory. Space folded inward. Time gasped. The Voidwalker fleet, CONVULSED. No cry, no scream, only a tremor across the radio bands, a sound like broken static trying to remember how to be a voice. Ships bent in half as if caught between dimensions. Tendrils of anti-light lashed and recoiled. their impossible geometries fragmented into spirals of unbeing. The black prism orbiting far beyond the battlefield flared once, then cracked. A fracture raced across its obsidian surface. Ancient glyphs unraveled, screaming in light. A pulse rippled through the galaxy, not energy, not code. Something else. The remaining Voidwalkers, their forms leaking logic and mass, fled into folds, slipping through cracks not yet mapped, tearing into subspace like frightened animals. But as the rift stabilized, a new rhythm beat against the silence. Not human, not Vanner, a pulse, synchronized to no known frequency. A whisper without words. It wasn't just the Voidwalkers that had been disturbed. Something deeper, older, had heard the scream. And now it answered. They found him adrift in the event horizons. Echo, surrounded by vaporized wreckage and pieces of dreams. Arlen Voss was alive. Barely. The Vanner salvage crew, hardened by exile and grief, pulled him from the fractured cockpit. His body was mangled, limbs scorched, bones laced with dark matter fractures. It took 7 surgeries, half of them augmented with Vanner biotech, to keep his heart beating. Neural scars resisted healing, but something deeper was broken. He didn't speak. Not during surgery. Not during transit. Not when the fleet, what remained, gathered to salute him in silence. He stared at walls, stared at stars, always listening, as though something was still whispering to him. Run visited, sat by his side, asked nothing. Days passed. Then, one evening, as twilight bled across the glass hull of the med deck, Arlen moved. Just a whisper, not a scream, not a speech, just one sentence, as if the universe had placed it inside him. The void wasn't hunting us, he said. His eyes glowed faintly. Not human, not alien. It was ... listening. No one responded, because somewhere deep beyond the veil of known stars, something had just leaned closer, and it was still listening. Silence followed the screams. The war ended not with a ceasefire, nor a declaration, only absence. The Voidwalkers had vanished, folded back into the dimensions that spawned them, or perhaps simply waiting in the hollows of the cosmos. But the galaxy was broken. The Accords' official count listed 47 billion dead. Entire star systems rendered lightless. Chiros was gone, a glassy remnant where a world once turned beneath clouds. Vanner Prime, once the jewel of civilization, was now an obsidian monument to hubris. Gravitic aftershocks still warped its orbit. The survivors didn't speak of victory, only survival. Every station bore scars. Every orbital husk floated like a tombstone. On fractured moons, names were etched into titanium spires, too many for stone. Fires were lit on ships that would never fly again, but no more Voidwalkers came. Not yet. And so they rebuilt, slowly, quietly, without faith, but with fury. Vanner remnants offered knowledge. Pirates offered ships. Old enemies now shared circuits and rations. A galaxy once bloated with pride now moved with caution, because somewhere out in the dark, the silence pressed back. Waiting to be broken. Again. Earth welcomed Arlen home with parades. He never attended. He stepped onto the soil of his birth world, not as a hero, but as a shadow made flesh. His cybernetic spine whirred softly beneath the weight of prosthetic limbs. His eyes, one human, one artificial, stared past every reporter, every politician, every ceremony. The Accord tried to decorate him. He refused. No medals, no speeches, except one. Mera's memorial floated above the edge of lunar orbit, a simple torus lit with pulses of blue. He stood before it in silence, and when he spoke, his voice trembled with something worse than grief. Purpose. She didn't save us, she bought us time. He looked up at the stars, voice hardening. Don't waste it. Fleet Command, once the iron heart of Galactic War Doctrine, was Institute. A glass and stone arcology hovering in geosync over Earth. No more admirals. No weapons simulators. Only archives, dialogue chambers, and memory. Arlen Voss walked its halls as its first instructor. Taught ethics now, history, diplomacy, not how to win wars, but how to question why they begin. His class is filled with students from across the star's Vonner descendants, human cadets, silicate scholars from asteroid clades. They debated. They challenged. They learned. He kept Ria's flight jacket hung behind his office desk, untouched. And sometimes, in the silent corridors between night rotations, Arlen walked alone. Past the still halls, past the echo of his own footsteps, and he imagined his daughter there, half a step behind. Just out of sight. Listening. Watching. Still standing. Dr. Ville Run became the conscience of a broken era. Her work, The Fracture Age, chronicled not just what happened, but what it meant. It dissected fear, power, and the moment civilization. Remembered humility. Her thesis was simple. We were prey until we chose to become something else. The book unified fractured systems, shaped education, and seeded caution in the generations to come. 6 months later, Run vanished. No farewell, no coordinates. Only a final log entry. The dark still listens. I must know what else it remembers. She went alone into uncharted space. Some say she searched for answers. Others say she became one. The black prism was never fully shattered. Now it hangs in silence above a neutron star encased within a Dyson vault, guarded by sentient drones and time-locked firewalls. Only a select few are allowed near it, and even fewer understand what they see. It doesn't pulse, not exactly. It hums, a resonance beyond spectrum, more felt than heard. Scientists argue it's a quantum echo. Mystics whisper it's a soul. Some who've stood near it say it speaks. One technician resigned after 20 minutes inside the observation ring. When asked why, he only muttered, "I heard her voice. She asked me to open it." The Vault Council meets quarterly to debate its fate. None vote to destroy it. No one votes to move it. The prism remains. And sometimes it hums louder. Years later, under a cool sky tinged violet with nebula drift, Arlen Voss walks through the overgrown courtyard of the old fleet command. At his side, a young alien student with fractal eyes and quiet curiosity. They stop before a monument, a scorched Corvette wing, propped upright in stone. Beneath it, a line etched in 6 languages: "We faced the dark and did not blink." The student gazes at it, then turns. "What were they? The ones you fought?" Arlen exhales slowly, eyes rising to the endless night above. "They were a mirror," he says, "of what we could become." Silence stretches between them. Then the student nods, thoughtful. Together, they keep walking. The stars burn on, distant, eternal, and not entirely silent.